Hi, my name is Jenica Smith, and I'm a full-time faculty member in the Department of English at Southwestern Illinois College. Before coming to SWIC, I worked as a Blackboard support specialist and instructional designer at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. While I was there, I helped faculty build quality online courses using the Quality Matters rubric. So this assessment map that I'm about to show you is largely influenced by that. Alright, so this is my very first class that I ever taught as an adjunct in 2015. Up here at the top, you can see that I have our course learning objectives. Now, these were given to us by our department, so we didn't have a lot of say in those course level objectives. But all of the module level objectives I came up with on my own. Also up here at the top, I have a quick view of when each of those objectives were going to be assessed in what unit. In this first three columns here are the course objectives. Now I've already gone through, obviously, and chunked these as we talked about in the last video. I will say that there's quite a few objectives per unit here, and there really need to be a lot less. I did find that when I was running this class, it was really hard to assess all of these in a 3-week time period. But if you look here on the side, one of the things that I like to do with my assessment maps is I color code them. So I color code them to the course level objective. And then the next column was my formal assessments. So when I first was developing this alignment map, anything that got a grade on it, I considered a formal assessment. Anything that was an in-class activity, some kind of collaboration, a discussion, a personal journal, I considered an engagement activity that was self-assessment, and they got a complete incomplete on it. So everything in this column, they actually got a grade for. The problem with this is that these blogs, and I think later on there's even a few journals, really should not have been a formal assessment. Those are really more of an engagement activity, so that's something that I changed later. Then the fourth column here is instructional materials, and the instructional materials were basically just the readings that we had to do for the class. I like to bring in a lot of social media stuff into my classes because I feel that's something I need to engage students with, so I did add a column for social media, and then I had a worksheet handout notes column that, as you can see, rarely got used. This is a really simple version of how you can do one of these maps. I did mine in Google Sheets because we were a Google campus and it was easy to access this when I was in the classroom because, as you can see here at the bottom, I actually do a lot of different stuff inside of this Google Sheet, not just the alignment map. But you can do this in Excel. You can also do it in Word. I have a Word template that I started on, but I really needed the flexibility of being able to move columns around. So that's why I ended up moving my stuff over into Excel. But you can do it in anything. If you find a really cool mind mapping software, you could even do it in that, or project management software like Wrike or something like that. But this was just the easiest way for me. So this is a really simple one. So I'm going to briefly show you the one I used for last semester. So this is for my spring 2020 class. This is also an English 101 class. Now, all of my English 101 classes are themed, and they're usually themed on monsters. Like the previous assessment map, you can see up here at the top, I've got my objectives, and then when you go down to the learning unit, you'll see that I've coded that, so like AA corresponds to presentation, this objective right here. Just like with the other one, I've got my units broken down. You can see that I actually am assessing fewer things per unit, and it was so much easier to make sure that I was evaluating people properly. Also, some changes, as you can see, I separated out my summative assessments and formative assessments. Now, last semester, at the beginning of the semester, I was going to try to do 2 summative assessments per unit, and I actually ended up changing that right before the semester started to just 1 per unit. I didn't go back and fix the map though. And I was not very clear on what kind of formative assessments I was going to have them do. I just knew that it was either going to be a discussion or a journal. And so I kind of listed that. So that's what I mean about complex or easy as you want it to be. You could just simply say quiz, journal. Again, we have instructional materials just like in the old one. I was more deliberate with these instructional materials. All of those are generally textbook readings. The supplemental readings were the things that were related to the theme, but there were also some open educational resource materials that I also wanted students to read that ended up in that column as well. And then I kept my worksheets and handouts, and then the social media component, again, I just put that here kind of for notes, but I didn't really use that a whole lot. You'll see when we look at the one for fall how this has changed and how I've taken into account what I did use and what I didn't. Up here at the top, I tried to do a workload calculator, but it just really never came together for me. This was a good idea, it just didn't pan out. Your assessment map doesn't have to be perfect. It can be something really basic and you just cover objectives, assessments, learning materials, and that's it. But it's prepared me for the map that I'm about to show you. So this is my fall 2020 map. Up here at the top, we have our course objectives. Here is the alignment map. It's color coded, so now I can look at it. And it basically just gives me an overview so that I can see, am I assessing everything? And is it pretty equal across the board? Learning targets was something I played around with in the spring. This is when I actually figured out how to use it in this class. I also fixed my workload calculator and made that into something that was useful so I could actually calculate how much time students would be spending in my class. This is all color-coded because there's so much information here. I try to keep my objectives per unit pretty short. There's about 8 per unit. It works out to where I'm assessing about 3 objectives a week, give or take. The chapter guide, these are weekly topics that we're going to be covering. The good thing about this chapter guide, though, is I can either do them as weekly topics or they're just really subtopics of that module. So I can still convert this into an 8-week or a 6-week course without having to change any naming conventions. I did work my learning targets in for this assessment map. This just tells me what I'm trying to assess for that particular objective, whether it's a knowledge skill, a reasoning skill, a metacognitive skill, or a performance skill. I was very mindful about trying to organize these in such a way they made sense as students were performing the action. So I simplified the summative assessments I learned from last semester, so we only have one summative assessment per module. And then here are my formative assessments. They're smaller pieces of the summative project. As you go through and complete those formative assessments, it should be giving you the building blocks for your final summative assessment. They have all of the pieces, they just have to put it together at the end of the unit. The learning activities directly relate to the summative and the formative assessments. So these are more collaborative activities and self-assessment kinds of activities. They can do a discussion that's going to help them figure out how to do something that's a formative assessment that's going to feed into their summative assessment. In the other video I mentioned, making sure that your assessments and activities align with your objectives. If you go through and you look at my objectives, so like this one, they have to explain something. When you go and look at the learning activities, they're going to do a think, pair, share, where they're going to have to explain that to each other and then to the class. And then they're going to do just a 1-page essay, and they're going to explain what is the purpose of purpose when it comes to rhetoric. So you want to make sure that whenever you're looking at your objectives, that what your verb is what you actually have them doing to practice. So later on, they're going to have to do an analysis. So they're going to have to analyze a relationship. So for this unit, they're going to do a this-that argument. So they're going to have a discussion where they have to do a little bit of analysis. And then they're going to have to write just a short little activity where they talk about what is rhetoric. So they're going to use the stuff that they've done earlier in this unit to then be able to talk about what does rhetoric mean and do just a very informal personal analysis on that. One of the things I'm doing new with this particular map is I have separated out instructional materials from instructional readings. It's all about continuous improvement. So I want to do more of my own instructional content. So the plan is to do my own videos and guides that are going to inform the learning activities and the formal assessments and help them build those summative papers. The instructional readings here are readings that are going to support the videos and guides that I'm making. And then finally, I have themed readings. And what's different about my themed readings this time around is that they're going to be able to use those themed readings to directly impact their learning activities and formative assessments. For instance, if we look at Unit 2, we have a combination of journal articles, articles from the internet, and some fairy tales, songs, things like that have to do with Little Red Riding Hood and werewolves. So what they're going to do is they're going to read these short children's stories, they're going to listen to these songs, they're going to read these journal articles related to them, and then they're going to go back into the learning activities and the formative assessments, and they're going to use those themed readings to help them finish those activities. If they choose to, they can use those same readings to do their summative assessment, which is an infographic. So they're welcome to use Little Red Riding Hood as a subject for that. But if they want to, they can go pick a different story. I've tried to be more mindful about making everything connect, and I feel like that's something that I didn't do in my previous assessment maps. But this has been since 2015. So this is kind of 5 years in the making, and you can see that it didn't start out this way. The last thing that I added was these workload calculators so that I could code and see like how much work I think students are going to have to put in. So these are just a few examples of how you could make your assessment maps. Again, they can be as complex or as easy as you want them to be. If you're new to teaching online, I would definitely keep it simple. I would just focus on mapping your assessments and learning materials to your objectives. Just a 3-column simple layout, and that's it.